Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Great. So I was going to say, welcome to the Department of Data Science and AI. You have been spending your time in all the other places so far. But basically, you have done the basic for all information. Okay. And so I'm standing here. Two things. One, light is in my eyes, and the fan is here. Okay, so I'd like to stand under the fan and talk. Hopefully that's fine. So what we have planned for you today is to have a series of talks on AI. Right. So what was the goal of RSI when we started? Anybody tell you about the background of RSI when we started? First lecture. Anything? No? Exposed to basic science. Yeah, fundamental of science. So get more people interested in, excited about science, right? So why are we having an AI day for you? Isn't it all about engineering? With everything, right? Not just science, right? So the AI is integrated with everything. So, but one of the main things is it's getting harder and harder to think about doing science without AI, right? In fact, 2 days back, or was it yesterday? Everything is in muddle. So we had a discussion at the Indian National Science Academy about what should INSA, which is the premier science academy in the country, what should they do? So that scientists can start using AI better. Because if you don't have AI exposure, we strongly feel that researchers in India will start falling behind the global standards, because everybody is using AI so extensively in science. So one way of thinking about your exposure to the topics today is to think of that we are also training you to become better scientists, right? So it's not that we want everybody to do AI only. Not that I would object, but in the larger interests of the subjects, the field, the overall scientific ecosystem, I think people should specialize in various disciplines while trying to figure out how to use AI to do their job better, right? Just like you use computers in everything now, right? Even 5 years ago, I would have asked you to put it away, but today I can't, because you will say, "Oh, that's my way. I'll take notes. I don't know how to write with a pen and paper anymore because I've never trained." It might be true, but let's see. Okay. So I titled my talk, and in fact, I'll confess, I actually gave a talk sometime back in the Music Academy. How many of you know about Science at the Sabha series of talks? Anyone? No, not you. You don't know. Any of the students here went to any of the Science at the Sabha talk? They have been running it now for 9 years. It's organized by IMSC. Of course, it happens once a year, so this year's happened, but I would encourage you to look out for the next year's Science at the Sabha talks. Amazing set of talks. There will be mostly scientists from around India who will come and talk about their research and their whatever is their passion for about an hour each. So there will be 4 talks, and this is accessible to the general public. So we have students as young as 8-9 years old, and all the way to people who are 80 years old, who will be attending the Science at the Sabha talks. It's supposed to be accessible to the large public. So this year we had an astrophysicist and a neuroscientist, a mathematician, and a pseudoscientist give a talk. I mean, saying that because I do engineering, I'm not a scientist. So, but I kind of used those slides there and added a little bit more meat to it because you guys are not general public, are you? So I made add a little bit more meat to it. Let's see how we go. Okay. So that's basically what I titled this as. So how many of you have seen this story? At least one, two. Okay. So, but this made a lot of news some time back. I guess all of you were too busy studying for your exams and not following the news. But this was actually, it made a lot of splash because this guy claimed that he used AI to create a vaccine to cure his dog's cancer and so on and so forth. That's not really what happened, right? So it's not that the AI cured the cancer, right? The AI did not cure the cancer. So it really needed a lot of scientists, a lot of work in the lab behind it. But what the AI did was, kind of gave them suggestions as to what you could try. You could look at this, you could look at that by reading a lot of research papers and kind of synthesizing ideas from various papers. But then it did not get the right answer, just like that. It was not like an oracle that just told you, okay, do this, the cancer will get cured. It suggested like 10 different things for people to try, and he was a very rich man. So he could actually pay people to say, to go and follow the leads that the AI was giving, and therefore he kind of had it, the drug developed. So that is the right way to look at how AI is going. This is not the way to look at AI. This is not the way. So some magic that's going to cure, right? But it's going to be something like an ever-present guide. Okay, the interference seems to be stronger than I expected. Still doesn't work. Okay, fine. So there are a lot of all of this news that people keep talking about, right? Some company or the other comes and says some historic AI breakthrough has happened in the last 1 week, 2 weeks. Now humans are becoming redundant or something like that. And then of course there are all kinds of stuff, and people keep talking about all. Do you even comprehend what that number is? I can't. Right? So people talk about all kinds of insanely large numbers, and but then everybody thinks AI started in 2022 November, right? So do you know this was the first announcement that OpenAI actually made about ChatGPT coming online? So this is not the beginning of AI, right? So AI is not new. So how many of you recognize that person, Alan Turing? Great. Well, I also have the name down there. So what did Alan Turing do? I'm sorry? One of you at a time. So you go first. Yeah. Okay. No. Nope. So I'll come to the Turing test. The Turing test is not super intelligence. Turing test is not a framework for AI or anything like that. But Turing did something that is even more amazing. He gave a mathematical abstraction as to what can be computed by a computer. So basically he defined what could be the limits of computation even before people invented computers. Can you imagine? It still holds. What he said is computable, right? Still holds. We have not been able to break through whatever he had characterized as, okay, this is computable. Even given an infinite amount of resources, this is what you can do, kind of thing. So he managed to characterize it. That is I would say that has been a more impactful contribution of Turing, even though he did save us from the Germans in some sense. But this has been a more impactful contribution, and it was not him alone, right? The Enigma thing was not Turing alone. There was a big team of people working along with Turing, but because of his other unquestionably genius contributions, so Turing is more visible to us. Yeah. That's not part of the talk. That's not part of this talk. Anyway, go on. What? No, it is not broken by quantum computers. It's basically, there are certain things which he said could happen only if you can do things in parallel. So that the quantum computers can do. It's not like, it's still not invalidated. Okay? So it's still there are limits to computing. Anyway, so that is one thing, amazing thing he did. And the second thing that he did, because that's the reason his picture is here, he actually gave an answer to that question. So he kind of sidestepped that question, but he gave an answer. So when you ask this question, can machines think, right? So Turing did not give an answer to that. He gave a very behavioral answer. So what he said was, okay, let's say you are doing a blind test. There's a computer in a room. There's a human being in another room. You can just, you can only interact through maybe written questions, right? And by repeatedly questioning the two, if you are not able to say which room has the computer and which room has the human, then you can say that the computer is intelligent. That's what he said. So there is a lot of holes here, right? Because he didn't say what kind of questions you have to ask. Right? He didn't really put a limit on how much interaction you can have with the computer. This is more like a thought thing, right? So he basically said, if you, with some amount of, like a finite amount of interaction, you are not able to tell apart who is a human and which is a computer, then you would say the computer is intelligent, right? He didn't say anything about how the computer computes the answers, right? How would you come about that? So that whole, the process he just ignored, right? That's why I'm saying it's a behavior answer. He didn't say, is a machine really thinking? I don't know, right? So I don't know what is thinking. I don't know what is human intelligence, right? So I only can come up with a definition based on what is observable. So that answer he came up with. Do you know what he called it? He didn't call it the Turing test. He was not so megalomaniac. He didn't name the test after himself. The people who came later called it the Turing test. What did Turing himself call it? Any idea? The imitation game. He called it the imitation game. That's the name of the biopic they made on Turing. He called it the imitation game because he was basically saying if the computer can imitate a human being close enough, then it is intelligence. He didn't really talk about the process of how this intelligence comes about. Okay. So people later came and started thinking about it. And so the term AI itself, right, was coined a few years after Turing wrote that. This happened in 1956. A bunch of very, very smart people at that time got together and they ran this workshop, which was later called the Dartmouth Conference on AI, where they coined the term AI. And the goal of the conference, right, or the workshop, was to figure out a way that a machine can, precisely simulate the process of thinking. Right? Just simulate. I mean, not really think by itself, but like running a simulation of any other process that you will run a simulation of. Can you run a simulation? Like, I'm pretty sure you've seen flight simulation. Right? That doesn't mean that it's actually flying. Just like that, we're going to have a simulation of what intelligence is. And they hope to be able to complete it by that summer. So we're still struggling to figure out what intelligence is. But when they actually set up this workshop, right, they said that by the end of summer, in like 8 weeks or 12 weeks, I forget what, 8 or 10 weeks time, that they would have an answer to this. That's the expectation with which they set out. Little did they know what they were kicking off, right? So AI is not new, but AI success is also not new. That's a picture of Arthur Samuels doing a live demonstration on TV back in 1956 of a program that learns to play checkers and learns from scratch. Right, so it actually was very successful. He's a very good checkers player. Nobody taught it how to play anything. It just learned repeatedly by playing games and so on and so forth. I mean, people talk about it like a big thing now. Back in the 50s, Samuels actually had done it for checkers. And of course, there are all these. Eliza was a chatbot that you could go and buy in Radio Shack, which is an electronic store in the US, electronic chain in the US. So back then, and of course, I know some of us who are old enough to remember the early 90s, there were advertisements for washing machines with fuzzy control, right, and things like that, which were being sold even in the Indian market. So these were all like AI-powered washing machines and things like that. So people were doing that. So a lot of AI hype and AI successes have happened. So here is a picture of talking to Eliza. So I'll not let you read it too much, but it was based on something called an expert system. So the expert system was basically a long set of rules, right? So the idea behind these rules is that you write down these rules by talking to experts, right? And basically, so your computer also becomes an expert because it's executing the same rules that an expert is executing. And as the interaction unfolds, right, it will figure out which of these rules apply to that situation. There could be more than one rule that applies to the situation. Right? So then you try to figure out how do you break ties, and move on, right? So that's how expert systems were put together. And of course, as this whole thing kind of evolved into more and more complex things. So instead of just a simple set of rules, people started thinking about how will you represent knowledge in more comprehensive ways rather than just simple rules, right? And so it culminated. I would say one of the biggest success stories of this line of work was the Watson engine from IBM. So how many of you know Jeopardy? Jeopardy is a quiz show, right? Yeah, okay. All. You're asking me, why are you asking me this? I saw the look on your face. Of course you know this. Oh, Jeopardy. Jeopardy is a quiz show, right? So now the Watson engine can play Jeopardy, right? It's actually playing. It's a general quiz show. It's not like you can ask questions about anything under the sun, and it still manages to play that well because it has a huge, very huge knowledge graph that people have created, and it uses that, right? And of course, there are other ways in which people try to solve hard problems. So how do you play chess, right? So don't look too closely at the picture, but you can systematically enumerate moves and outcomes, right? So basically, that's how you think you play chess, right? You just look at the board. If I move like this, what will the opponent do? So on and so forth. Right? You do this kind of a research, but the problem is this kind of outcomes can become very large very soon. So humans don't do this full enumeration and try to search, right? So similarly, you wanted to have methods by which the computer also can do this enumeration and search, but not do the entire space of it. So people came up with ways in which you kind of focus your search only on small parts of the outcomes, not on the entire tree of possibilities, right? So things like that, and so all of this became part of AI, right? So this was the way in which Deep Blue. Oops, I'm missing a picture here. Okay. So how many? I don't know. There's this very iconic picture of Garry Kasparov sitting in front of Deep Blue, looking like this. Like both is like he's having a headache, right? So he'll have both his hands on his head. He'll be looking at it because he's losing to Deep Blue, and he just right. So I heard Garry Kasparov talk about that later, right? He said he was not disappointed that day because he lost to a computer. He was disappointed that day because it's the first time he had lost in gameplay. He had lost in full gameplay, not in blitz, not in the short form of chess, full match play. That's the first time ever he had lost. Not just to a computer, even to a human at that level of play. The first time ever he had lost. So that is why he was disappointed. So he has now become a huge proponent of AI. He has this ultimate chess or something. He has a new form of chess where a human AI team plays another human AI team. So he is kind of popularizing that. He thinks that AI is there to augment human capacity, and we should not run away from it. So and of course, Deep Blue was like this lot of Godrej Bureau size computers there, and they were the ones that were actually doing the thing. But essentially, it was using this kind of search techniques to play, right? And of course, the same search techniques can even be applied to prove theorems, right? So you kind of start with the known facts. Right? So that's basically your board positions, right? And then you have like the rules of the game. You have like these rules of inference. So if I know these three things, then I can conclude this. Right? Then if this is true and that is true, then this third statement must be true. So you can kind of start composing this chains of reasoning, and that's like the rules of game. And using that, you can start off with some initial hypothesis, initial axioms, and then actually derive the proofs that you want to do. And back in the 80s, people actually used AI to prove non-trivial things, and but it just takes a lot of engineering, a lot of work. And today, if you just turn on a Gen AI model, it's just churning out proofs for you. So things have improved significantly, but it's not that everything is new. And of course, same thing, the hype is also not new. AI hype is also not new. The Navy revealed the embryo, it's obviously US Navy, revealed the embryo of an electronic computer today that it expects will be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself, and be conscious of its existence. When did they say this? Anybody wants to put a date on this article? Huh? Which year? Huh? 2000. Any other guesses? 99. Okay. The article is from 1950. Remember, when was the word artificial intelligence coined? 1956. Barely 2 years after they even knew what to call the field, people were giving this kind of hype. Okay, and even today, this is not true. Right? So we can, of course, it can talk, it can see, it can write, obviously, do all that. Walk, yeah, sure. Reproduce itself? Yes or no? Come on, yes. Now OpenAI is using AI to build the next generation of GPT-5, GPT-6. GPT-5 was partly designed with GPT 4.5. Huh? Okay, that's evil, but sure, yeah, of course. We'll go with what the public position is. And then, of course, it's not conscious. We don't know what conscious even means, right? So the AI is not conscious. But we made a significant progress, but certainly in 1958 it was not that, right? So AI has actually gone through this kind of repeated cycles. So, people get very excited about it, and then they figure out that all that excitement was not warranted. So we go into what we call as winters, right? There are at least 2 AI winters that we have gone through. So like a decade here, 70 to 80, and then this person. Anyone recognize this person? I would say he's one of the most important people in AI. His name is Jeff Hinton, right? And Hinton won one of the 2 Nobel prizes sometime back. And so Hinton actually came up with a technique that kind of sparked the interest in AI, right? Something called backpropagation. I'm not sure if anybody is going to. Unfortunately, we didn't coordinate our lectures for today, so you're going to get random topics in AI coming up, but I'm pretty sure it'll all be fun. So Hinton actually came up with something called backpropagation, right, which allowed more powerful AI to be built, even though people knew how to. Conceptually, they knew it was possible. They didn't know how to get there. So Hinton gave a way of getting there, and so that sparked this interest in the second wave, right? And then kept growing until people again got into a second winter, primarily because of the overhyping. Right? People expected too much from AI, right, too soon, and then they figured out it is not doing well on even simple problems. So, for example, one problem that used to be very hard was vision, right? How to solve vision. So for you to look at something and say whether it is a man or a woman, it's mostly an easy problem, right? But it used to be super hard for computers. Even to say where there is a face in a picture, right, used to be super hard for computers. Sounds silly now, right? Because we have cracked it. But before we cracked it, those things used to be very hard problems. And so now we are making this. So when we started, failing on even simple problems like that after decades of investment, so the interest waned again. So we had a second winter. Now we are going through a third and a fourth wave without a winter in between. So the third wave was through deep. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And now we are in this age of generative AI. So what is very different about today is that we are getting a raw AI as a product. So ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that, it's not been designed to solve any one problem. Like I was telling you about Eliza was designed to solve, help giving medical advice, right? And then we talked about Deep Blue, which was doing search, but basically designed to solve chess, right? Or IBM Watson, which was designed to play Jeopardy. Now I'm just giving you an AI. Say, okay, do whatever you want with it. So AI is now just a raw AI is a product, right? So that is something that is very different today, which you never had in the past. So I think it's well, I don't know where we are going to go, right? But then again, the hype cycle has started. We are giving Nobel Prizes to these, so physics and chemistry, and so we don't know if it's warranted or not. So, like I said already, AI is not a single technology. We talked about rule-based systems, right? And then we talked about search, right? Then talked about logic-based reasoning and all those graphs and so on and so forth. And then, I mentioned the word deep learning. I'll come back to that. But it's been very successful in a variety of things, right? And then the whole other set of problems we solve when you do learning to rank, right, on recommended systems. Then something called reinforcement learning, which was used to play. If I remember Samuel's checkers playing program, that used something called reinforcement learning. I'll talk about that in a bit. And then of course there are all kinds of hybrid approaches, and AlphaFold is the discovery for which the chemistry Nobel was given. So I always used to use AlphaFold as an example of a biology problem that AI solved until they gave it a chemistry Nobel and ruined my story. So I have to now figure out a different thing for bio. Right? So a lot of these. So one of the main drivers in recent days, right, has been this idea called machine learning, right? So machine learning is sometimes what we call inductive learning, inductive machine learning, is to try and learn rules. Right? We talked about how experts can give you rules earlier, right? But now you're going to try and learn these rules from examples, as opposed to somebody writing down the rule itself. Right? So what they're going to do is they'll give you a bunch of inputs. This here is okay. If I stand there, I'm blocking their view. So I just wanted to sit here. Okay. So you'll give a lot of examples like this. So I'm going to give all of these examples and then say all of these are airplanes. I don't tell you why there is an airplane in there. I'm not giving you the rule. I'm just giving you blindly saying, okay, all of these are automobiles or cars, right? So all of these are deer. So how many deer have you seen on campus? Many. How many different species of deer you see on campus? 4, 2, 3. How many say 3? 3 species of deer. Okay. So all of you guys rush. You should be able to name the third species after yourself. There are only 2 species of deer on campus. So if you found a third, so you can go and name it after yourself is what I'm saying. So there are only 2 species of deer. There is a spotted deer and then there is a black buck. There is an albino black buck, but it's not a different species. It just has it's an albino black buck because it doesn't have the skin pigmentation. So it just looks white, but it's actually the black buck. Anyway, see, so it's not that easy, right? Identifying deer species and all that. So it's not that it's solving too easy a problem. But then basically I don't tell you what is a deer, right? I don't say it has antlers, it has spots and things like that. I just give you a bunch of pictures and say it's a deer. Okay? So like this. So now the goal is to actually learn a rule from this, right? And the irony is that this question, can you learn knowledge from just examples, goes back to Aristotle. He's one of the first people recorded to have asked this question. And sometime during the 1500s, right? Not later. So the philosophers in Europe actually concluded that inductive learning is a fallacy. It can never happen. See, I think we have proved them false now. So what does inductive learning do? The idea is that you're going to, I'm just simplify this here, right? So we're just going to draw pictures. So no equations. The others will give you enough equations. Great. Others will give you a lot of equations. I'm going to do pictures. How much time do I have? You're not the boss. How much time do I have? 10:05 is the next class. Okay. Who? You. Okay, I'll negotiate with him. Okay, anyway. So let's say that we have all these points and things like that. Right now, so what is happening? So what is happening here is that, so there are a bunch of people, right? So I plotted just the age and income. There might be other things, just easy for me to plot 2D. So all these people in red did not buy a computer. All the people in blue bought a computer, right? So this is what I give you. Now I'm asking, learn a rule that will separate them, right? Okay, so that I'll be able to classify new data points. That's a new point that has come in, a new customer that's come to my shop. I need to know whether he's going to buy a computer or not, right? Okay, there should be a bunch of, forget about it. So yeah, we are anyway short of time. So let's just stick with this. There could be many different ways in which I can try to classify this points, but this is one possible rule that I can do, right? So what kind of rule this is? Some kind of a quadratic, right? So I'll have like ax squared plus bx plus c or something like that. So that gives me this. So these a, b, c are the things that you are learning from the data. So you basically try to find an a, b and c that will make sure that you make as few mistakes as possible on the data that is given to you, right? And once you learn that, then I can go ahead and assign a label to the point that I didn't know. So I'm going to say this guy will not buy a computer. What's that? Hey, you can use many different kinds of algorithms. When you use K and N, your line will not be this smooth. It will be a lot more complicated. And the challenge with K and N is that you don't have that ABC. I said three parameters that you are learning, right? You'll have basically it's a lot more complicated function that you learn when you use K and N. But you can use. I mean, there are hundreds of algorithms you can use to learn this. This is just an illustration. Yeah. So what happened is, so instead of using this kind of simplistic things, so people started using more and more complicated functions, right? Like he said, K and N is one, but then you could use a lot more complicated solutions for solving this kind of problems. So this example I showed you comes from a challenge, what's called ImageNet challenge. Right? So this challenge that was running for several years, and so year after year, people were trying to solve this, and so basically, they had about 30% error back in 2010, right? And in 2012, so the people introduced this notion of what's called deep learning. You can see that there's a sudden drop in performance in 2012, and after that, it just kept dropping until now we are better than human error rate. We're almost at zero error rate. The humans actually make around 5% mistakes on the data. But we're getting better and better, right? So what is this deep learning thing? So deep learning, I'm not going to get into the math of it. So it was inspired by how the brain recognizes images in this particular architecture I'm talking about. So the idea here is that you're going to have some computing elements, right? Some very simple things which do some multiplication and addition. Okay, not a very complicated unit. So each dot here, right, in this picture is something that does a bunch of multiplications and additions, right? That's it. Right? What they do is they take a look at one patch of the image, right, and then look at all the pixels in that patch, and then compute a function based on that, right? And then you do this many such things. Each one of this is a specific computation that happens. Right? And then you keep doing layers and layers of it. So the second layer will look at a patch that you have computed in the first layer and so on and so forth. So what happens is that each layer eventually learns to respond to a certain kind of pattern. So the first layer will look at colors, patches of colors. So there will be one dot that will respond if the color is all green, another one that will respond if the color is all blue and things like that. And then sudden gradients in color, straight lines like this, and things like that. And then the second layer, which is looking at combinations of these, then learns more and more complex patterns, and then keeps going. Each layer after keeps learning more and more complex patterns until you are able to recognize full objects at the end of it. Right? It's like learning pieces of the thing. And the nice thing about it is, nobody tells you what to look at, right? What piece to learn, right? It's all learned by just giving the labels to the images, and it learns from there. And you can see that I just showed you an example with 4 or 5 layers in the previous slides. But then people talk about 8 layers, and then they talk about 150 layers and all that, and it learns all kinds of crazy stuff. It's also hard to train, so that's why people say, oh, you need a lot of compute for AI, right? But this is all dwarfed now. This is all like nothing, right? Nowadays, people use trillions and trillions of parameters. I said we start with 3 parameters A, B, C. Now we have trillions of parameters that people use for solving problems, and that's why it's like solving things at an amazing scale, right? So we keep hearing about another term. I threw it in earlier, so I'll just very quickly talk about reinforcement learning. So we said all learning is done from data, right? But how did he learn to cycle? Hopefully not from data, right? If I show you 1,000 hours of YouTube videos of somebody cycling and give you a cycle, will you be able to go and do it? No. So you have to try, right? So some kind of a trial and error needs to happen, and so sometimes you fall down, you get hurt, right? Or a parent is there, or an uncle or aunt who claps and say, yeah, well done, good girl, or something like that. So you get that feedback, right? But nobody tells you how to actually cycle, correct? So what you are trying to do when you are learning to cycle is what I call learning by evaluation, not learning through instruction. So if you look at this example, right, so I actually give you instructions in some sense. If I show you this picture, you have to tell me it's a dog. I tell you what I expect from you, right? That's an instruction. When you talk about cycling, so you try something and you fall down, you get hurt, oops, okay. Right? You fall down, you get hurt, and that's an evaluation, right? So you have to try something and get evaluated for it before you start learning. So that's basically what reinforcement learning does. So I'll skip some of these. Okay. Now I have finally come to the conclusion I need a new clicker. So people know tic-tac-toe? Okay. So I'm going to give you an example from tic-tac-toe as to how to do RL, right? So let's say that the normal supervised way of learning would be, so I give you current positions, right? And I'll tell you instructions as to how to make a move here, how to respond to that position, right? And then you learn a rule from that, right? So given a new position, how will I play that? So that is basically how supervised learning will work. How reinforcement learning works is that, okay, I'll say go play the game, right? And if you win the game, I'll give you 1 point. If you lose the game, I'll give you -1. If you draw the game, I'll give you 0 points. That's it. I will not tell you how to play the game. So you have to try playing different ways to figure out when you win, when you don't win, and all that, and then you learn from repeated play. Okay. So do you think it is possible? It's a very simple way of doing this. There is this thing called the menace, which Michie and Chambers. So Michie was one of the like the godfathers of AI in the UK. He kind of kickstarted the whole field in Britain. So he came up with this very simple way of getting matchboxes to play tic-tac-toe. Back in 1960, right? Getting matchboxes to play was easier than actually getting his hand on the computer, I believe, back then. So he had a bunch of set of matchboxes, and each matchbox had a position encoding on top of it. So each one of these corresponds to this position. So 2 O's here, 2 X's here. So that's the position this box corresponds. So while you are playing the game, right, if you land in this position, then you pick that matchbox, you open it. You'll find different colored, beads inside. You'll find different colored beads inside the matchbox. You pick out a bead blindly. Right? So each bead corresponds to one of the positions that you can possibly put an X in. Right? So there are 5 positions here. So there will be beads of 5 different colors in this matchbox. You open the matchbox, pick out a bead at random, right? And then whatever that bead tells you, you put an X there. Right? Remember this for the entire game. You play the full game. You remember where you put the X. Right? Which bead you took out. At the end of the game, if you win the game, what you do is you go back and look at all the matchboxes you opened, put back 2 beads of the color you took out. put back 2 beads of the color you took out, and close the matchboxes. You're ready for the next game, right? So what have you done now? Remember, I was picking out a bead at random from the matchbox, right? So that means that I'm just sampling one of those moves, right? So one of these 4 moves will come out at random. Now I put back 2 beads of the same color. I took out one, but I put back 2 beads of the same color. So the next time I come to that position, the chances that I will pick the same move have gone up, because there are more beads that represent that move now than there were earlier. So the chances that I will pick the same move is gone up, right? And if I keep playing the game again and again, and from that position, if I play that move and I keep winning, what will happen? That box will get overrun with the beads of that color. So I will always be playing that move whenever I come back to that board position. Okay, make sense? So what happens if I lose the game? What should I do now? I should reduce the number of beads, right? Because if I increase the number of beads, I increase the chances of playing it. But I don't want to play a move that cost me to lose, so I will remove them. Okay? So that's basically how I keep playing. What should I do if I draw? Just leave it as it is. You don't have to worry about it. Just put the bead back and close the matchbox. You keep playing this repeatedly, and eventually, after a few games, you start playing better. You learn to play the game of tic-tac-toe. So we did something very simple. Yeah. Take away the bead. Whatever is the bead that you. Huh? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, you don't start with one bead of. Like each bead is not just one copy of it, right? You start with several beads of the same color to begin with, so that it allows you to do some exploration. So it could very well be the case that even while you are learning, even before you know that it's a great move, you would have made a move and then you would have made a bad move, because all moves are equally likely to begin with. So you might lose even after you make a great move in the beginning. So you don't want to lose the ability to repeat the move. So you have, let's say you start with 5 beads of each color or 10 beads of each color, as opposed to starting with only 1 bead of a color. So if you repeatedly happen to lose after playing that, only then you lose the move completely. Give up and go home. So basically, what will happen is, when there's a valid question in tic-tac-toe, that is a case where you will always lose. But I'll come to that in the next slide. Yeah, you do the best you can, right? So if nothing will let you win, you basically will do what? Play at random, exactly. So that's what you'll do. Doesn't matter what you play, so you'll end up actually learning that I don't care what I play. So one way of thinking about what is happening here instead of matchboxes is to think of like a game tree, right? So you start from here and then you make each moves possible. So that's all the matchboxes are represented here, right? And sorry, this is the condensed version of it, but I've decided I'm not going to give you the full talk. I'll probably stop after this. So what happens when you are doing the moves described in Menace, right? So you're going to actually trace a path through the tree until you come to the end, right? And if you come and you find that you're 1 here, you're going to go back through the tree and change the probabilities of taking the moves, right? No beads here. I'll actually have explicit probabilities of taking the moves. So I'll go back and change the probabilities of taking the moves. That's what I'm doing, right? But let's say that somewhere in the middle, I come to this position. Okay. Now, can O win from here? No, right? O can't win from here. So, do I need to actually play the game till the end to know whether I have won or lost? Right? As soon as I come to this position, somewhere here, I can say, oh yeah, I have won from here. I can go back and change the probabilities of all the moves that led here. Correct? Is it a valid thing to do? Maybe. Okay. But how did I know there was a winning position? Sorry? No. but you actually knew the rules of the game and you reasoned about it and things like that, right? But the agent that is playing this doesn't know the rules of the game, right? It just knows where it can put X and Y, but it doesn't know how to reason about all of this and things like that. If you're going to reason, then you basically are in the search domain, right? Here you're just blindly, whenever a position appears, you're just picking a move at random and you're playing. You can't really do the reason, right? So is there a way to make the learning agent realize that this is a winning move? Huh? So yeah, see, all of this become more complicated, right? So there's a very simple way to do this. Remember, you are playing this game repeatedly, right? You're playing the game repeatedly. So what you do is you just keep track of the number of times you won after you came to this position. So in the past, I have played 100 games. I have seen this position, 30 times, and 28 out of the 30 times I have won, whatever reason, right? Or 29 out of the 30 times I have won, right? So that's a good move. That's a good position to be in. Not a good move, it's a good position to be in. Right? Now, so if I go from a position that has like a 30% chance of winning to a position that has a 90% chance of winning, then I can declare that move as a good move. Get it? And how do I know these chances of winning? I'm just keeping track of it from the past. Okay, I've come here. So this is a very dynamic thing, because as I change the way I play, the chances of me winning and losing also will go up and down. So I have to continuously track this number of times I have won and lost, and I can use that, right? So to go from here to here, so I don't really have to wait for the whole game to end. In fact, now I can start using this idea of changing the probabilities up and down, even if I don't know when the game will end. Tic-tac-toe is very nice. It will end at most after 5 moves. Right? But there might be like chess, things can just go on forever, right? I don't have to wait for the whole game to end before I start learning something from it. I can actually start making these things along the way. So because I'm using the predictions of winning from time t plus 1, right, and comparing it with the prediction of winning at time t, and then looking at the difference. So if I go from 30% to 60%, I'll increase the probability of that move. If I go from 60% to 30%, I'll decrease the probability of that move. Right? So I can keep doing this. Because I'm doing this comparison between two timestamps, this kind of learning is called temporal difference learning. I'm looking at differences over time. Right? So it's called temporal difference learning. And so it's a very simple rule that explains pretty complex behaviors. So it's had significant impact on behavioral psychology, neuroscience, etc. It was proposed originally by these 3 people, Dr. Sutton and Anderson. And of course, it has been one of the biggest success stories. It began a lot of modern AI success stories are built around RL, in my opinion. So AlphaGo was the first computer program that comprehensively defeated a professional human Go player, right? And so it's no human data, trained from scratch by playing against itself, just all the way back to what happened with Samuel Checkers player and a bunch of others. Right? So it did all kinds of interesting things. This is a very iconic thing that people talk about, move 37. Right? So look at this. That's a very strange move, said the commentator who was watching the game. The humans could not explain why the computer made the move when they were actually watching the game. And afterwards, when they did the analysis, they figured out that it was like an amazing move, right? That was the key reason the computer won. Oops. So I thought it was a mistake, said somebody. At least it all the guy who was actually playing the game, it took a full 15 minutes to figure out how to respond to that move. Because that move was so unprecedented that it learnt it only because it was learning by itself, right? It's not learning from some human labeling. So that is one of the nice things about what is happening here. Right? And of course, this was also the driving factor. One of the key parts of AlphaFold, the AI that solved the protein folding problem. So people know what protein folding is. So I have to pay lip service to science here. So protein folding. So our body has a lot of proteins. Right? They are the kind of building blocks of life. So so the proteins, normally you specify them as a big sequence, right, like this, of 22 amino acids, 20 amino acids, right? So these are the sequence, and each one is given a letter, and then you look at it like this. But as soon as this sequence is created, right, it somehow gets folded into some kind of a very complicated 3D structure. So the function of the protein is not only determined by the amino acids that constitute the protein, but also the folded structure itself, right? And we still don't know, despite AlphaFold giving you the right structures, we still don't know the mechanism by which this folding happens. Even today, we don't know how this folding happens, how this 3D structure comes about. Okay? And so a lot of people have been spending, a lot of effort, and there is even a protein. There used to be a protein folding competition. I think basically AlphaFold kind of killed it. So there used to be a protein folding competition where year on year people were trying to come up with better algorithms that can predict the 3D structure of the protein. It became very key, right? So things like personalized drug design and also trying to figure out certain disease mechanisms and so on and so forth needed you to know how this structure was formed. Not how, but at least what is the structure that is formed. And that is the problem that AlphaFold solved. And so AlphaFold 2.0 basically managed to predict about 97% of the protein structures accurately. Of 97% of the proteins that we know, it predicted the structures accurately, right? Not 97% of the structure. So they actually started building this database which they can use for just query the database. Now I don't need to worry about trying to predict the folded structure. I can just go and query the database, and so it's like think it's all they believe that it was such an important contribution, which it is. It in fact completely changed the nature of the field, right? So it got the Nobel sometime. And of course, it's not quite the Nobel, but the Turing Award is essentially the Nobel Prize for computing, right? And so Andy Barto and Rich Sutton got it for their invention of reinforcement learning. So I had to put up this slide because Andy Barto is my PhD advisor. And so I'll stop with this, I guess. I was going to talk about LLMs. Should I? Okay, fine. Give me 5 minutes. Okay, I'll give you the similar kind of pictorial introduction to what large language models do, because everybody talks about LLMs, and I really like this thing. So let's skip, right? So you know all of these things. Yeah. So let's just quickly one thing. So this is the usual AI, right? So I'll give you data to train on. I'll give you an image. And I'll ask you what the label is, right? What does generative AI do? Right? Similarly, I'll give you data to train on, but I'll give you a label. Hey, what does a dog look like? Now, it is not just a question of assigning a label to an input that I have given to you. Now, I'm giving you a trigger, and I want you to generate something in return. So, I want you to generate the picture of a dog like this, right? So what do you have to do? Notice that this dog is not actually there in the row. You can make out this tiny pictures. This is a completely different dog than the one that I given you for training. So the model somehow learns the dogness of the image, right, and is able to create an image that looks like a dog based on all the pictures of dogs that you have seen. So that is basically the idea behind generative AI. You try to understand what is the mechanism by which the input was created. Not just assign labels, not predict labels for it, but also try to understand the mechanisms of the input creation and then use that to create outputs, right? So the idea has been around for a long time, but now we are able to do it at such unprecedented scale so that it becomes useful. Right? So here's a simple exercise. So I want you to fill in the blank. Movie, great. Anything else? Huh? Video. Anything else? Huh? Match. There you go. Cricket match. Something I would say, oh, physical activity, huh? Movie, video, come on. Huh? Animals. Ah, yeah. Deer, whatever, right? So you can have multiple different answers for this. Match, game, play, movie, all of those things, right? So how did he come up with these answers? I watched, no, it's just, I say I watched, and you just say, oh yeah, whatever I have done most frequently in the past, movie. So now I give you this additional thing. Movie, right? Play. There you go. So you probably say movie, some people say play, but you're certainly not going to say match, right? Certainly not going to say game. Maybe, I don't know, because I think the World Cup final was telecast in most movie theaters, but the chances of you saying that is very less, right? So the more I give you, the bigger the prompt I give you, right? So the answers are changing. But the way you are actually generating these answers is literally by taking advantage of the frequency with which you would have probably said this in the past, right? So instead of drawing on only your experience, if you draw on the world's experience of having generated the sentences in the past and somehow try to capture that, so that is what large language models try to do. They try to generate answers by expanding the prompt that was given to them, and they do this in a much so it's something like this, right? So I form some kind of a probability, like of course you don't form a bell curve because you're talking about words. You form some kind of a discrete distribution, right? So in this particular instance, when I give I watched the probability of you saying movie or game is high. The probability of you saying something like courage or the word the. So you're obviously not going to say I watched the, right? It sounds obviously looks wrong, right? Even though there might be some very weird situations under which that might be correct. So the probability of you saying these words is very low, while probability of you saying things like movie and game is very high. Right? So what happens is, for each of these kinds of prompts that I can give, right? Oh yeah, I have to say it. This idea goes back to the first person to do a model like this, probabilistic model like this was Claude Shannon back in 1948. Wow, nothing is new, huh? So basically, you can say this sounds more correct. The cat sat on the mat will have a higher probability of being generated than the cat sat. In some sense, you can claim that your model is learning whole knowledge. This way, learning these probabilities. If the probability of 2 plus 2 equals 4, 3 plus 2 equals 5, you can claim it's learning better. And so what we are essentially ending up doing is for every possible prompt that I can give you. That's one row here. This big matrix you are learning. Each row of the matrix, in some sense, corresponds to a prompt that I can give you. And each column of the matrix corresponds to the probability with which you say the word in that column next. So each column corresponds to this next probability distribution like this. So it's crazy. So suppose that I have let's say I have 50,000 words that I can possibly say. That's the vocabulary size, 50,000 words. And the prompt size, I watched in the theater, I watched that big thing I gave, right? Let's say I can go up to 8,000 words in the prompt. Total of 50,000 words. You can imagine, so I'll have 50,000 to the power of 8,000 rows, this matrix. How many columns? It says 50,000 columns, but why? For every word, I will have a probability of saying after this. So for each word, so 50,000 words, so I have 50,000 columns. Imagine the size of this matrix. Huge. Right? And what the LLMs do, what ChatGPT and others do, is essentially take a lot of data, take the words data, crunch it, and learn this matrix. Whenever you're asking all kinds of complicated questions, uses that question to go to a row in the matrix. And then it looks at the words that could possibly say after you see that word. And then we pick out one word from the random. So obviously, you don't learn a row like this, you don't learn a matrix like this because it's, I believe it's more academic than words. So you learn something much more compact. It doesn't have that number which has only a few trillion numbers, as opposed to that number that I showed you, 50,000 into 8,000 or 50,000. It's a huge number. You only learn something that's it's a very, very complex, deep neural network that you learn. This is called a transformer. So you learn this architecture, and that gives you your problem. Gives you a way of sampling for this problem. I have to say, I told this to the great result. This was like this.
that's basically it. So what you do is I give you a prompt, right? Then I generate one word. Then I take the word, add it back to the prompt, and generate the second word. And the second word back to the prompt, and generate the third word. And this way of generating things by looking at one word at a time and rolling the word back into my input is called auto regression. You know, regression is when you do a bunch of work. Auto regression is you keep moving the prediction as you keep predicting something, add that to your context, and then you predict the next one. That's called auto regression. So most of these LLMs operate through this kind of auto regression. The limit of where these things reach, right, is like crazy. So, Donald Knuth, right, is like considered the father of computer programming. He developed this art of computer programming books, series of books, and he done a lot of seminal work, foundational work on defining computer algorithms. And he wrote recently, I learned yesterday that the problem that I've been working on for several weeks was solved by Claude equals 4.6. Okay, it didn't quite solve it. It told people how to go about trying things out and so on and so forth. And it seems that they ended up solving this problem only for odd numbers. Guess how they solved it for even numbers? They asked Italian. They asked? Italian. They asked German. So basically they gave the output of Claude to Gemini and said, okay, now you take a stab at it, it came up with something else, and somebody else thought, human, right, saw that, oh, if you put these two pieces together, it's solved for every number. So they basically merged everything together. Now the problem is solved. When Knuth wrote this, it had been solved only for odd numbers, but even that was a big thing. So I stop here. And I would like to express the gratitude to for taking the time to actually taught us the history of IT and see how it works and our really was learning to take that one. So normally I just like really learning it, but it was really fun and everything.
And I mic here.